Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of the Research Triangle PowerShell User Group. My name is Mike Kanakis, and it is the 7th of May, and we welcome you to join us tonight for another conversation about all things PowerShell. Before we get started, let me welcome in my co-host, Phil Bossman. Hey, Phil, what's new? How are you?
I'm well. I'm super excited. We came back from PowerShell Summit a couple of weeks ago, basically earlier in the month, and it was a blast. We're actually just the end of last month, and so here I am wearing my Microsoft swag. When you're in Washington, you go to the store, you gotta buy something, So thought I'd definitely wear my Microsoft hat. Oh, and you got your pen.
My big purchase. I really went crazy. I went crazy. I bought
Where's
3
your mug?
pens.
You were like, I want a mug.
3 pens. Oh, I do have 2 mugs. Yeah, I do have 2 mugs. Yeah.
Are
So we are
you
we
actually
are
using that mug?
we are we are basking in the afterglow of PowerShell Summit. And speaking of PowerShell Summit, we have invited one of the people we met at the summit to present tonight. We'll get to him in one second. But before we do that, Phil, I wanted to ask you, how do you go about deciding what tools you use to help you make your life easier when you do your work? So do you have like a standard set of tools that you work with all the time, or like your home machine is different than your work machine, or do you have a core set of things that it's like every place I work, this has to be there?
I think that's where I go is I just have one machine and I roll them together. And so I when I'm not using my work machine effectively, then that's where it goes. And so I don't do PowerShell outside of work. So it's one of those things where all of my automation and all of those tasks are all work related. And so when I'm not doing it, but it is one of those things where if I try to get away from those machines, I just feel naked.
All right, so I'm going to ask you a tough question then, based on what you just said. Are you outside of work?
Oh,
Are you doing PowerShell?
yes,
So then
on my work computer.
all right. So the reason I ask is because I'm like you. I probably have a standard set of tools that I use in most places, but it's a minimal set of tools. And so today we want to welcome in Lucas Allman. Hey, Lucas, how are you? Come on in and join the big show. There he is. Hey,
Here I
hey, Lucas,
am.
how are you?
I'm doing very well. Thank you very much for having me today.
Yeah. So tonight, Lucas is going to be talking about essentially sort of a subset of what I was talking about, which is kind of building your own tool set to make your own sort of do configuration as code through, let's just say, like a Band-Aid set of tools that he hacked together to make work to do a bunch of things, and sort of talking about the benefits of doing that and why you would do that and maybe the pitfalls involved with that. So before we get started, why don't you introduce yourself to everybody at home, give us a little bit about your background, and maybe tell us a story about your wonderful summit demo that you did in the
Sure. I think a set of Band-Aid tools hacked together is putting it nicely for some of these things. Well, no, my background with PowerShell comes from, I think, the same place as a lot of people. It was curiosity. I learned that it existed, and from the moment it was on my computer, I refused to use command line. It was only PowerShell. I don't want the black background. I want the blue background. It's the new stuff, so I got to use it. And so what started as a little bit of curiosity mixed with a lot of curiosity that I always had about programming. I always knew I didn't want to be a programmer, but I was interested in programming. Why, how, why so many languages? And those two things kind of fit together really well with PowerShell. It's a very accessible language, right? It's very easy to read. And as long as you know those core kind of programming concepts of loops and if then else, then you're off to the races. So for me, it was always looking for opportunities where I could use PowerShell for what I was already doing. And that started with little scripts here and there that I certainly wouldn't want to go back and look at how they were coded now, 8 years on. But little by little, I grew more opportunities. I joined the mobile team at my work, so we were in charge of all of our iOS and iPad devices, and I think there's something like 40,000 of them across the globe. So it was really heavy Graph API. And when I joined the team, Intune had just made the transition from Silverlight, so we had just gotten into Graph API in the Azure portal, and that's where a lot of it started. A big part of my day-to-day these days involves a lot of Graph API, and that led to the role that I'm in now, which has a very, very specific title. It's automation, and they didn't bother explaining it much more than that. But it was basically, we got a bunch of specialists on my team, and if they are busy doing admin work, then they're not doing specialist work. And so if we're paying specialist dollars for admin work, well, we're overpaying for admin work. So the idea was you got a team full of people who probably could do a bunch of automation on their own, but they don't have the time to do those things. So enter me. Now I'm pretty much doing PowerShell and PowerShell adjacent automation stuff most of my day. So I really kind of lucked into and stumbled into a dream job there, which is really cool.
That's pretty cool. I don't know whether to congratulate you for saying you work with the Graph API a lot, or to say my condolences to you. There's definitely days where I feel both. Yeah. Before we get started, I got to ask, what's on the back shelf behind you? I'm so curious.
Oh boy, what isn't on the back shelf behind me? Okay, so this is my office. Used to be in my youngest daughter's room, and then and she was in this room as the nursery. She got a little older, so we swapped so she could have a bigger room. And this is exactly what it looked like when I got done fishing everything back through the wall. Probably a year ago now, and haven't touched it. But we got just your standard ISP routers up there. I've got a Ubiquiti Edge router for the actual routing stuff. Philips Hue box, just a bunch of junk up there. If I can, is there anything incriminating down here? No, okay, I can move the camera down a little bit. I've got an old Lenovo Think server down there, just because I love the look of the IBM ThinkPad stuff, and that was $200 on Facebook Marketplace. So I bought it one day just to have something to tool around with. And other than that, we got some Christmas lights, and we got some junk that has nowhere else to go in my house. So nothing overly exciting.
Well, for 1 month out of the year, this video will fit right in with your Christmas lights. The other 11 months of the year, people wonder why there's Christmas lights up. And I should just give a little clarification. I made the comment earlier about Band-Aid, and honestly, when it comes to PowerShell, there's really nothing wrong with considering it as a Band-Aid, because that's one of the benefits of PowerShell. We have a very rich community with a lot of tools, and the idea of a Band-Aid maybe is not the right thing, but pull together a set of disassociated tools into your own little package of things to make it work the way you want it is probably a better description. And so maybe that's a good point there to hand over to you, Lucas, and let you do what you want to do tonight. Yeah, maybe we'll just hand it over to you and go from there. Unless, Phil, you have some words you wanted to add in.
No, and I think part of this is just even just give props to Lucas. For those that didn't go to Summit and wanted to kind of do that introduction, is that Summit is about learning and engagement, and kind of talked a little bit about that earlier before we got on camera. But this idea that Summit is this community that people engage with, but then also a unique thing of Summit is the opportunity for attendees to actually come out and give lightning demos. And I was very excited to hear of ideas that the community would give, and also certainly what Lucas was going to talk about. And so I was super excited to see it. And then here came, he gave a great little demo, and I don't think he's going to even talk about it tonight. But then this idea is like, hey, expand that beyond that. And so we also want to use this group, and certainly welcome Lucas in to share with the community, and just know that if you think that, hey, I just started off, I'm doing this little thing, I started off, but it's a passion for you. If you're watching this video, or if you're even in this meeting, you are, right, part of our crew, and really we want to engage with you, and also hopefully give you the opportunity to do what Lucas is doing tonight and just share with the community overall. And I just really want to thank Lucas for doing that, and then, give him that opportunity. And so, with that said, and just put you on that little pedestal here, Lucas, and you're up.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it. It's obvious that the two of you being professionals at this, I can tell
Hey,
you spent a lot of
that's good.
time.
That's good. Come on now.
Well,
This
no,
is
hear me out. I'm just gonna say, I can tell that you spent a lot of time, on your intros, and it
oh,
wasn't something that you slapped together, because it fits so perfectly with a lot of the things I want to say tonight. So, that's why you get together with the professionals. But no, thank you for that introduction. It was a great opportunity to do a lightning demo at Summit. And for anybody watching this, if you're going to attend Summit, which you should, then you have to go to the lightning demo sessions, maybe even do one, which you should, because it's just a great opportunity to 5 or 7 minutes show something off. And that's where the basis of today's presentation is going to come from. For my lightning demo, I wanted to show off something called task configuration files, which is a name I made up for something that already exists. And it was actually PowerShell data files. And the whole kind of premise of that was a small nugget of a larger tool set that I've been slowly piecing together, and have something that I'm somewhat proud of, and I want to show off a little bit tonight. But I want to talk about what. Also, I don't know if you guys need to add me as a presenter before I'm able to share my screen to show some of this fun stuff.
remember that part about being professional?
Right.
Yeah.
You guys can only do so much. I mean, your AV person, I don't know where you got them, but but
We don't have magic lights, we're just using the theme here,
that's right. You got to get some. You got to get some. So one of the things I wanted to talk about today, one of the themes that I want to touch on, and it was one that you guys so expertly or have already touched on, is that sometimes these things that we do, uh, they are a little bit of a band-aid. They are a little bit of a, I can do that. I think I can do that. Let me try to do that kind of thing. And that is the beauty of PowerShell. That is the beauty of what makes it such a useful tool. There's a saying, and I kind of put it in the little blurb for today's meeting, and it's basically, don't ask, can you do it with PowerShell? Because the answer is probably yes. Ask, should you do it with PowerShell? Because it's not always the most perfect or the right tool for something. But there's another saying, and it's the right tool is the one that you know how to use, right? And so for today's presentation, I want you to understand that I decided for various reasons that I was going to move forward with building a tool set for configuration as code. And we'll get into a little bit of what that is and why you'd want it and what my tool set looks like. But I want to make sure that anybody watching understands that there are configuration as code tool sets. They exist. They're out there in the world. They're very mature products, and many of them are open source, don't cost you anything. So what would go into a decision to make my own tool set of something that is already a mature product set that's out there in the wild that you could use today? I want you to understand that I didn't do this because I'm a genius and I'm amazing at PowerShell, and I can do it better than anybody else. Those are just bonuses. The reason that I did it is because I could, and because I wanted to learn, and because this all started as my personal journey of how do I work on my workflow and make my workflow a little bit more ADHD friendly, so that I'm not losing scripts, I'm not rewriting things that I know I've written 1,000 times. So this presentation isn't going to be an expert telling you what configuration as code is. I'm somebody who's got a general idea and can fake it for the next hour. I'm not somebody who is the top tier PowerShell developer who is out there, and that's why I made this. I'm just not. But I did put together something. I put together something that works. And I want this to be a video that encourages you to not doubt those ideas of, I bet I could put that together and I bet it would solve this problem. Even if there's something else better out there, even if there's something that has been created already, if everybody who's going to use this, everybody who's going to need your solution, if they can handle you using this as a learning experience and it's not going to bring down production, then you should absolutely do that. And this is that presentation. So that's why I've given it the subtitle here, rolling your own configuration as code toolset, why it's inadvisable, misguided, time consuming, and you should do it too. And so I think the plan that I have here is I've got a demo and I'm going to show you some of my configuration as code framework. I wrote this like piece by piece at my day job, and I have taken it and put it into my my public GitHub and day jobified all of it and took out all of the references to the company and things that were specific and hard coded in ways that they probably shouldn't have been hard coded, and have tried to turn this into something that is a little bit more public and dynamic. It is not because I think you should go out there and clone it and start using it. If that floats your boat, you may do that. I will offer no support. But I put it out there for two reasons. Again, number one, maybe I'm talking to myself a little bit here when I'm giving the advice publicly, but you have to do these things out loud. You have to do them publicly. You have to put things out there because everybody writes bad code. Every single person who's ever written code writes bad code presently in their godlike programming state of now versus where they were when they started. Everybody, every day, and you're no different. And so you should build the thing that you want to build. You should put it out there, and that's what I'm trying to do here. I'm hoping most of it's going to work. Most of it has worked so far today in my mad scrambling to make sure that I tidied it all up. But that's all just part of its character and fun, isn't it? We're probably going to go over some alternatives that I could have used because, again, I've made a tool set, but it's not the answer. There's lots of answers out there. There's lots of different ways I could have gone about things just within my tool set. And I think a big part of your PowerShell journey is when you discover that there really isn't, and there's exceptions to the rule, but there really isn't a right way and a wrong way to do something in PowerShell. There are beneficial ways. There's ways that will give you more benefits, and there are ways that maybe you are going to present maybe a barrier later on. And so the more we can think about how do I create this dynamically, how do I create this so that it works today for this, but can easily be adapted for something later on down the road, that's when we start to write really useful stuff, right? So that's what I want to go into. But again, this is a demo of something neat that I made, and this is not a you should do exactly this because this is the new hotness. And also build that thing that you want to build, even if it's not perfect, even if it's been done before, even if PowerShell maybe isn't the right tool for the job, because in the end, you're still going to come out with a tool set that works to solve the problem that you were presented with. Configuration as code. So for the uninitiated, what is configuration as code? There are many as code terms out there. A popular one is infrastructure as code. And the difference between infrastructure and code and configuration as code is kind of where down that set of steps you start. With infrastructure as code, quite often you're using these, my baby monitor going off, you are using these concepts to create, well, the infrastructure. You're using it to describe a server and how many cores it should have, how much RAM it should have, how much hard drive space it should have. And then the configuration aspect of it is, now that you've got this server, what's it doing? What's on it? How is it configured, right? So the idea is, rather than having to go out to a portal and click on all the GUI pieces, or having to download a module, do all of the commands kind of individually, configuration as code is, yeah, here. Thank you very much. Configuration as code is the ability to describe what you want with code and have that be your source of truth. So rather than going out to the thing and doing the thing on the thing, you describe the thing in some code. And by the process of whatever it is that you have for your framework, in this case, Toolset, I'll show you, something will look at those descriptions and then create what you described. In my case today, we're going to be talking a lot about scheduled tasks and describing scheduled tasks. But here's 4 big words that define configuration as code. And most of them I can pronounce properly. Idempotency or idempotency, not sure, doesn't matter. If we're always on the internet, I don't have to pronounce these things out loud. For this, it's, you want to be able to have your configuration as code build things the same way every time. So it doesn't matter what server you're on and where you place it. You run your framework, you run your tool set, and it looks the same here as it does over there. And so for me, that's we're going to look at something called get pull scripts, which again is just a name I made up for something that already exists. And how I kind of make sure that the latest code is always on my server. Declarative definitions, again, you're describing stuff. You are creating a code file that describes the thing you want. And in my case, it's scheduled tasks. So you'll see when I start going through it, every one of the properties that you'd normally put into the GUI for a scheduled task, we're declaring that in a file and having a script kind of run through it. Version control, probably a term you've heard before, anything that can save a history of the code and allow you to kind of fall back to old versions or merge with other people in their collaborative coding. So for me, it's GitHub. Could just as easily be something like Azure DevOps and the many other ones that are out there. And continuous validation. So you want to continuously be testing your configuration, make sure it's still what you expect it to be, make sure that there's no stale components that shouldn't be there anymore, and make sure that you are still falling within any defined rule sets that aren't necessarily technical, but are maybe a process-based rule set, like a naming convention. So that's my class. That's my class on configuration as code. We're going to hop into the demo now. The demo that I did at Summit was around this idea of task configuration files. And a task configuration file, like I said, it's a name I made up for something that already exists. It is a PowerShell data file. I'm going to open up my, do I have that Lightning demo? I thought it was on there somewhere. So I have taken kind of this framework and created a repository called psconfig as code framework. It's on my GitHub. I think I linked maybe I didn't link my GitHub in the details, but I'll get that into the chat in a little bit. I'm going to hop in here. I'm going to go over some of the, I guess maybe we'll make this a little bit bigger. No, we won't. Yes, we will. We'll go into some of the details of the structure of everything, but I just wanted to take a minute to focus on this particular piece because to me this was the part that took quite a bit of time, and this is a part that that I'm proud of, and this is a part that was kind of the catalyst. It was like that idea of can I do that? And once I started to figure out, okay, I think I can, it was the snowball that led to everything else. And sometimes you just have to chase those rabbits down the rabbit hole, otherwise you don't know. Um, so this is a PowerShell data file. It has an extension of .psd1. And an area where you may have seen a .psd1 file before is module manifests. It's that metadata file that you have for a module that tells you who made the thing, what the name of it is, where the root script for it is, what commands are exported from it. That's a PowerShell data file. The thing that's kind of interesting about them is you don't see them very often. At least I wasn't running across them very often in my experience. It was mainly the module manifest files. And what I started to learn when I looked into them was it's just a hash table written in text format to a file saved with a PSD1 format. And so it's a low barrier to entry because if you can write a hash table, then you're already able to use a PowerShell data file. And so if you look through this one, I've got a little bit of commenting at the beginning of it, but you've got that familiar @ symbol curly brace. I'll make this a little bigger. That denotes the start of a hash table, and then it's just a series of properties. So we've got a property called task name, task path, description, the things you'd normally see with a scheduled task. We've got task action, which is itself another hash table that contains its execute argument, its execute property, and arguments. Then we've got another one for trigger, and we can set the trigger once, daily, when someone logs in, all the same options that we have within the GUI. We also have the task principal property, which will create the piece of it that says who is the scheduled task going to run as? What account is it going to use? Is it going to have admin privileges when it runs, or is it going to have limited privileges? Is it going to store that password and run it whether that account's logged in or not, or only when that account is logged in? Those options are all here. There's another one here, principal secret name. This is something that we're going to look into a little bit later, but as you all well know, and as you definitely all don't do, we can't just put our passwords, plain text in our scripts, especially if we're putting them on GitHub and we're putting them out there on the internet. You have to find a way to manage those secrets securely. I'll show off what I'm doing. I'm just using the PowerShell Secrets Management secret store modules. It's not fancy, but it's encryption and it's not plain text in the scripts, and it works for our solution, right? So the right tool is the one that you know how to use. So we'll get into why I've got this principal secret name there, and then a whole litany of other settings that are available for scheduled tasks, like when it should terminate, should it run on battery, those kind of things. But that's it. That's the long and the short of it. It is a text file called .psd1, and it describes a scheduled task. It's a declarative file. And what I really like about this is this could have been JSON, this could have been XML, this could have been any number of other options, and JSON would have been fine. XML wouldn't have, but JSON would have been fine. What's great about this is it's still PowerShell. JSON is easy to use. JSON is pretty friendly. And if you're already building PowerShell, it's a lot less context switching if instead of switching your brain into JSON mode and had to pull that into and out of PowerShell, you can just start and finish with something that's pure PowerShell. The great thing about this is there is a built-in command that you can point to a PSD1 file, and it will render that file into an object in your session. And that's what I've done. So this is a scheduled task description. I have a script that will take that file, use that description, and build the scheduled task. And we can get into a little bit more detail about when and where this is getting used. But I just kind of want to go over more of a high level of how I'm making these scheduled tasks, because it's kind of the meat and potatoes of the configuration as code framework. But I have a script here, and it makes use of a couple of custom functions that I built. And I think if I scroll down, I'll see, remember what I named them. Okay, update PSC server schedule task, and somewhere here is new PSC server schedule task. So these two functions are the pieces that make the magic happen. They're the tool that creates the scheduled tasks. This script is a controller script. It has some logic around where do I look for these scheduled tasks, what ones should I look at and what ones should I ignore, and what should I do with scheduled tasks that already exist on the system but don't match any files that I find. But the functions themselves, they are making use of this import PowerShell data file function built into PowerShell 5.1 and 7. And all I'm doing is I'm pointing it to one of those PSD1 files. And it's creating a variable called task config. And from there, I can take those pieces, those chunks of that declarative file, that PSD1 file that was describing my scheduled task, and I can use all of these built-in PowerShell functions for creating scheduled tasks to piece by piece build it and then finally register it. So we've got new scheduled task action, task trigger, task principal. These are all built into PowerShell. And you can see that what it's doing is it pulled in that task file, it saved it as a variable called task config, and then it's going through and each of those properties, the task action property, the task trigger property, those were these things here. So task action is a whole hash table itself of arguments. Task trigger, again, is another hash table and a hash table of arguments, or properties, I should say. So it's breaking those pieces out, and it's using the. Go ahead.
Can I just say, like, it for those people who are not kind of seeing some of the magic that's happening here, is the fact that what you've done is you've taken that object and the PSD1 file that you've done is you've formatted it in a specific way in which now that you've created that, line 38 with task action, you're then splatting that itself because what you've defined as all those pieces, it can now be consumed with very readable code, and now it's splatted itself on the side. And so you kind of got some free stuff, and you'd have to construct some special object and all that kind of stuff because the configuration file you defined is all the parameters that you defined. So just kind of like make sure that those who see that what's happening. So I really appreciate how you've done that, Lucas, and it's kind of cool. Keep going.
Well, I appreciate the call out. I appreciate the call out, and sometimes you forget that these little things that were so mind-blowing when you first learned about them, not everybody has had the experience of learning about it or using it. So it's a good call out, and it's a great opportunity to remind people that there are help topics built into PowerShell that start with about underscore, and these are topics that are accessible with the get help command. Normally with get help, we would use that to find help about a process, or a command rather, like get process, and this will tell us, here's how you use that command. The about topics are really great because they're not about a command, they're about a topic. And so if you heard that word splatting and you have no idea what we're talking about, get help about underscore splatting is an entire document dedicated to just explaining the concept behind splatting. These are also available online, so if you Google search about_splatting, you'll find this exact same document online. And just a little bonus tip here, we went over this in the PowerShell Wednesday video too, but if you're not using control space for your tab completion, allow me to also introduce you to control space. Because if I type about underscore and I hit tab, it's going to tab me through all the available about topics. But if I do about underscore and then control space, this one's a little long, so it doesn't give me the opportunity to pick it with my arrow keys, but it'll give you the whole list of what's available. So what's really great is good learning comes from knowing where to find good information, but it also comes from knowing what you need to know. You know, we don't know what we need to know until we know we need to know it. This can be a good help to see what's out there that you may not have ever had introduced to you. You might have not watched this video at all, but if you saw about splatting, I bet you'd go see what splatting is just based on the name alone. So thank you for letting me go on that little side tangent there, because I think everybody should know these things, and using GitHub is super, super necessary in your PowerShell journey. But I'm hoping that maybe if we can, yeah, there we go, okay. So here's a quick example in the arguments here. They have the copy item command, and they've used an @ symbol hash arguments. And if we look up here, they have a variable called hash arguments, and it is a hash table stored in a variable. But they're calling that variable not with the $, but with the @ symbol. And that's really important, because what they've done is created a hash table where each one of these hash table properties matches up with the name of a parameter for the copy item commandlet. So you could type copy item. Actually, can I do this without it leaving? Yes, I can. So I could type copy item, and here's your control space again. We've got path, we've got destination, and we've got what if. So these are 3 parameters that are here with the copy item commandlet. So I could have typed test.text here and then done destination, and that would have been fine. That would have worked. But splatting offers you that ability to put all those parameters in a very easy to read hash table, and then just with one line, one small short line, send those parameters to the command. But not only that, if you have multiple commands that have similar parameters and they're all going to need the same values, you could create a hash table of arguments that are common to all those commands, and then use that on each one of those commands moving forward in your script, and just supplying the unique commands or the unique parameters outside of that where necessary. So it's a really, really useful tool, not only for efficiency, but for just readability. Because so often the important choices we make in PowerShell are the choices that help the next person who sees our script understand what it's doing. But yeah, good call out, because that's exactly what we're doing here. We're taking that hash table from the file, and we're just passing it on to the actual command by splatting. So we're essentially saying your scheduled task action takes a parameter of, what do we got here? Execute and argument. So normally you could type -execute -argument. Instead, we're getting it from the hash table. Okay, I think I've beaten that to death enough, but I think it's important to kind of get a little bit of repetition when we're learning new concepts, because some of us already know this, some of us just heard of it, and we all want to get across the finish line at the same time, right? So back to task configuration files. I'm using the built-in scheduled task commands. I'm breaking out my task configuration file into little pieces, passing it to each one of those commands. And at the end, it's going to use the This is my update command, so it's using the set scheduled tasks to bring all of those pieces together and update the task that already exists. There's another function in here. It's the exact same, but a little bit different. It creates a new one if it doesn't exist. This one here, and you'll see it's doing a lot of the same stuff. It is. Why does it have that up there? Oh, because it's in the help. It's doing the same stuff. It's breaking out that file, creating a new scheduled task, and then it's using, instead of the set scheduled task, it's using the register scheduled task command in order to register that scheduled task in the server. Here it is. One call out that I wanted to come back to was this idea of secret management. So my choice with this was to use the secret management module and the secret store module. If you haven't used those before, Microsoft.PowerShell.SecretManagement is a module that provides you basically a wrapper for other extension modules that store secrets safely and encrypted. And so you can get an extension module. I think that's the name for an extension module for a lot of different password managers like Bitwarden and OnePass, and they're community made. So if you think about it, it probably exists out there. Or you can use the secret store module, which just provides you a way of encrypting your passwords just within basically a file set on the computer itself. It's encrypted by the device and by the user. So if you picked up those files and moved them somewhere else, even if it was another computer on the same domain and you were logged in as the same user, you wouldn't be able to decrypt them. So they only kind of exist on that computer. So that's the module that I'm using. And so for me, that means that I can use this get secret command that comes from the secret management module. And you would use this command with any extension module, not just the secret store. If you're using one for CyberArk or Bitwarden or one of those, it would still just be get secret. But basically, when I made that scheduled task description, when I made the task configuration file, I told it the principal secret name is PSC automation. And that means that you should be able to do get -secret name PSC automation, and it will pull a PS credential object out of that vault. So you'll get the same kind of object, for example, if you typed in get credential and it popped up and it said, give me a username and password, like if we did something like that. And it doesn't pop up in PowerShell 7, it's inline, but here's my user and here's my password. And then it creates a PS credential object. So it's an object with a secure string password. It's encrypted while in memory. There's a bunch of other really useful tools or features, I guess we'll say features, when you are storing things as a secure string, not the least of which is that it won't display it in logs if you are logging all the PowerShell usage on your computer. Now, I'll stop and give the disclaimer that I'm not a security expert, and if you get fired from your job based on advice that I've given you here today in this talk, that's not my fault. So what it'll do is it'll look for that secret principal name in the task configuration file and then pull that credential from the local secret vault. That way, no plain text passwords, nothing in my GitHub is getting flagged as a leaked credential. All of those credentials will just exist within the automation server itself. So those are the functions that I built. This is a controller script, which is just if you're new to the world of module versus controller script versus functions, you do your best to create functions that do one thing and do it really well. And then you use those functions in a script that contains your logic about how should that tool be used. I think in a lot of the books, like the Month of Lunches books, they describe it as the tool is the hammer. The hammer doesn't know whether it's going to be used to build a house, hammer in a nail, or used to break a window. That's all up to the person controlling the tool. They direct the tool, and that's what a controller script is. So this script here makes use of those functions, and it will go out and it will first find all of the tasks that exist in a specific area. So I've told it to look into specific paths within scheduled tasks, and it'll gather all the tasks that are there, and then it'll gather all of the configuration files that it found, and it'll compare them. And if there are tasks in that path that exist that don't exist in these configuration files, then it's considered to be stale or not needed anymore, and so it'll disable it. You could choose to have it removed if you wanted to. I chose to disable it because I'm a pack rat and I like to hoard things. So that's what this controller script is doing, is just going out, pulling in those data files and using those functions to create scheduled tasks. That alone gives us the basis for something that's configuration as code. Let's go back to our little slide here. And let's talk about what is configuration as code and how does this fit? Well, if you have a description of your scheduled tasks and you are able to pull the credential from a secret store on the server itself, and you're able to run a script that on a regular basis is going to be culling scheduled tasks that aren't needed anymore and adding new ones and updating it with the latest version of the code, congratulations, you're using configuration as code. You are creating a central source of truth, which would be your repository, and that is going to reflect what scheduled tasks, what tasks, what automations are running on the server that you put it on. So let's zoom out a little bit, because I've showed you here's the weeds, here's the nitty gritty of how these things are getting done. But where is this happening, and how do these things get onto the server, and what's the structure of that? So let's have a look at this folder here. This is my psconfig as code framework repository. I've got a couple of folders in here for documentation and example files, but there's really three main important areas. It's the plaster templates, the PSC server module, and the server scripts folder. So let's start by diving into here. I won't necessarily go into the whole build process of everything with this, but suffice to say that we've got a folder full of functions, and you can see we've got update PSC server schedule tasks, new server schedule tasks, one I haven't talked about, new PSC environment variables. These are all those custom functions that I had created. They live in this folder, and I've got some scripts in here that spit out a nice PowerShell module for me. And hey, would you look at that? It's a PSD1 file. And hey, would you look at that? It's just a hash table with a series of properties. You'll never look at these things the same way again. So it's a really useful file set, and these this server module just kind of contains those useful functions of the toolset. The next part is the server scripts, and maybe I could be better at naming these things, but again, it's Band-Aid, it's thrown together, and it works. And that's kind of the point today, is I didn't want to show off something that is perfectly rounded and well, I'm gonna be honest, I did my absolute best to make this look as good as possible and make it look as not even look, to make it as useful as possible if somebody did pick it up off the street and try to use it. I don't recommend that, but that's always the goal, right, when we're making good tools. And so the server scripts file, this is where I'm going to store a couple of different things. I have this psconfig as code framework repository. It's a GitHub repository, and I clone that to my automation server. Within that repository, you are going to have two important concepts, I guess. Let's call them concepts. One is the task configuration file, which we went over. It describes scheduled tasks. That's what these are here. I have three of them. One is for the scheduled task that would run the script we were just looking at that goes out and does this whole thing and finds all these files. And yes, it literally updates its own task. And the other two are uh, uh, task configuration files that describe a scheduled task. And the task it's describing is a script that will go out and pull the content from some other repository. So my PS configuration as code framework repository, it contains all of the things that the server needs to set itself up to get all the things that it's supposed to have. But my actual automations, if I'm working in a production environment and I have some need for automations that pull data from multiple places and put it into a SQL table, or I've got an automation that runs every day to look for aging and stale devices in Azure and remove those from Azure. Things like that, I'm not going to put them in this repository. Those are going to exist in their own repository for those automation projects. So as way of example, because I took this from where I have it running in my day job, and I'm trying to create a teaching tool out of it. Can't just start pulling from what the actual production stuff is at my day job, but I've tried to create something that would illustrate what I'm talking about. So we have here a script. Name of it, get pull the real zero important production automations.ps1. So this is a get pull script. It is pulling the important productions automation repo from the real zero account. That's my GitHub account. So let's pop this open. Let's have a look at it. This is a script that simply, on a regular basis, makes sure it has the latest version of whatever is in that repo that you want cloned to the device. So it'll pass in a couple of things like the repo name, the owner account, what directory you're storing all these GitHub repositories in, and I will get into these environment variables right after this, and where to output the logs. And it's doing two things. It's saying, does this repository already exist in that directory where I expect it to be? If it does, it's going to get all the latest versions of it and just wipe everything that exists and make sure all of the latest stuff from the main branch is there. That way, even if somebody logs onto the server and makes some edits to the files on the server, those changes aren't going to last. The source of truth is the repository itself. And to make changes on the server, you make changes on the repository. That's that concept of configuration as code. All of your configuration for the server lives in those repositories. And so that's where it gets edited. If it doesn't exist, then it clones it. That's the long and the short of it here. So what the framework is doing is, I've only got one here, but imagining a world where you've got a series of different automations. Some of it is Graph API related, some of it is data gathering, some of it is, I don't know, maybe it's running some other function for a custom application in your environment. You typically have a repository for each of those, and this section of the framework is basically just a one script per repository. If you have other code in some repository that you need to pull down to the server, you create a script that will point to it and pull it down, and the server will forever keep that up to date. So I want to get into a demo of that, but this is all really nice when it's working. But if I had to create a task configuration file by hand every single time I wanted to create a new automation or point it to a new repository, that'd get a little tedious. And the whole copying and pasting and changing elements of it, that's not my favorite way of doing this either. But again, being a PSD1 file, there's a little bit of opportunity for using PowerShell magic instead of manual typey. There's a couple of ways I could have gone about this. I could have created an object that looked like this. I could have created a hash table that looked like this and had it all configured, and then send it out as a string into a text file and try to make sure everything, all the variables are what's the word for it, expanded, I guess, before it hits that. And that's where I started, was trying to figure out how do I make a function that outputs this text so I don't have to do this manually. What I settled with was using Plaster templates. And if you've never used Plaster before, Plaster is a module that's available that allows you to create a template of a file and a manifest that goes with that template. And I'll show you kind of an example here. But the idea is these two are my template files. And if I look at them, they mostly look like a task configuration file, but they've got some funky looking variables in there: plaster param owner name, plaster param repo name. And if we look at the file that goes along with it, the plaster manifest file, well, that's not where I wanted this to open, but that's okay, it'll help. You can see that it's, even if you don't know anything about plaster or XML, you can see it's making parameters, it's giving them names, and these names match up with some of the things we're seeing in that template file. And so to see it all kind of come together, demo is worth 1,000 words. So let's do something like invoke plaster, which is a function available within the plaster module. Give it a template path, and we'll point it at my git pull script template. So that's this directory that we were looking at. I'm pointing it at the whole directory here. And we'll say destination path. And we'll just do, just put that in the, I have one there? I probably already do, doesn't matter. Burn. So we'll put it to C/burn, because that's my version of C/temp. Makes me feel better about burning everything that's in it, because it's in the name. So I'm going to hit enter here. And you can see it's asking me what's the name of the repository. Well, it's repo name. That's the name of my repository that I want to get. Or super important production automations. What's the owner account? Well, that's on my Rails0 account. It's asking me what path do I want that to be in scheduled tasks. And again, I'm taking it for granted that people might understand what I mean by that. But let me pop open Task Scheduler just to give a visual. When we're talking about task path, we have here the task schedule library. And if you look here, there's a bunch of folders that are nested within it. Each of these is a path. Here's my path for my Lightning demo. So when we're saying task path, we're saying, do you want it just in the root of the task scheduler, or do you want it in its own contained folder? And in my case, that is what I want. So I have some defaults set, and I'm using environment variables for that. And I'm going to go over some of those environment variables right after this. But it's basically saying, do you want to use PSC automation as my task path, or do you want to enter in something custom? So I can say P for PSC automation, or I can hit enter because that one is the default. And then it's going to ask me, what's the path to the server scripts folder? I have a environment variable called PSC repo path. And you can do it. PSC repo path. And it's pointing to my PS config as code. Oops, that's the wrong button. Thank you. It's pointing to the repository that contains that configuration as code framework, that tool set. And so it's asking me, do you want to just use the path that's in that environment variable, or do you want to give it something else? So you can see where it's going with this. It's asking questions, and it's filling out the values of those parameters that we saw, and then those parameters are going to get shoved into the template. So we'll just take the defaults on all these. Yeah, that makes sense that it would error now and not before. Must be under the specified. Oh, okay, I think I just, there we go. I didn't have a slash when I should have had a slash. Okay, so now it's created my file. So if I go here to my c/burn folder, pull probably a few of them in there. Just look at it with the GUI because it'll be visually nicer. Go to our burn folder and we'll look to see that there are 2 files here. So here is my get pull script. So the script that actually goes out and pulls the automation. Super important repo name. I didn't change this to 0. I was just getting paste happy. There's my repo owner, and it's this one is basically just filling out the parameters, and then the script's going to use those parameters to pull down that get content. Here's the other file that it created. This is the task configuration file, and you can see it's created task name, GitHub, pull, super important production automations, etc. It's going to go into the GitHub core task path. Here's its description, and it's using PowerShell.exe and running a file that's found in PS Code framework, server scripts, git pull, blah, blah, blah. So this is creating the task configuration file that points to the script that pulls all this code onto the server. So once you've created some other repository, and that some other repository has some super important production automations, like in this important production automations repository, you use the same concept to create the scheduled automation that's actually going to run your automation, scheduled tasks that's going to run your automation. Up until now, all we've done is said, here are some important repositories. I need you to keep them up to date on the server, and I need you to make a scheduled task that will go out and every 10 minutes pull all the latest content from this set of repositories. Within those repositories, we're using the same concept. I've got a task config data folder, and my script will only create I got some backups in here from some of the stuff that I did earlier. Pay no attention to the backups behind the curtain. We'll just delete those ones. We're using the same concept. The script that creates those scheduled tasks on the server, it will only create them if the PSD1 file that it finds is within a directory called task config data. That's just something I chose and something I made up. Could have made it anything. But in this repository, I have a script, and the script does very important things. It imports the Pokedex API module and the DBA tools module, and it will go out and get the first 151 of the Pokemon found in the Pokedex, and then it'll write that to a SQL table, because that is my very important production task that needs to happen on a regular basis. So I've created a repository. I've created my automation. You can see here I've imported a PowerShell data file. Didn't have to, but I figured it's on theme, so why don't I? And that's just this one here, the hash table. And it has all of the parameters that I would normally use in the write DBA DB table data command. But now I've put them into a hash table, saved it as a PSD1 file, a PowerShell data file. I'm importing that file as SQL params, and I'm splatting it to that command. Didn't have to, but it just felt like a nice little illustration of the power of using PowerShell data files. So that is a that is kind of the full circle piece of it. Is here's my actual automation, and that same script is going to go through and find all these pieces of it and create those scheduled tasks. I did a little automation server here, and let's see here. Let's go into my cgit folder. You can see I've got my psconfig as code framework folder. So I'll go into that and have a look and see that under server scripts, I've got a git pull script that's pulling my psconfig as code framework repo, literally this repo that we're in right now. It's always pulling the latest data of that. And then my important production automations.ps1, or my important production automations repo, that one that we were just looking at with the important Pokedex commands. And so basically what it's going to do, as it exists in the world, it's going to continually pull those repos, make sure it's got the latest stuff, and then create scheduled tasks for any declared, described scheduled tasks it finds within those repos. So I can do something like, I've already done that because I didn't see it there. Git cd/git. This is where I am keeping all of my Git repositories. And I don't see my important production automations repository here. So what I was going to do is delete it and then show you that by running my create script, it will go out and create the scheduled task for it. Oh, I bet the scheduled task just hasn't run. That's probably it. So let's have a look at the magic of this config as code server scripts, and we will run the create, edit, or disable tasks from configs. Again, this is this controller script that is going to read those description files and pull them in. So I'll run that. So putting to my log destination. And so what did it do? It found 3 config files. It found 3 orphan tasks, so tasks that don't match the config files. It's actually lying to us because for some reason it's not working today, and I wish I could have had it working for you, but just trust me, it works in production at my day job, and it's beautiful. But what it's basically doing is looking at what exists there and what exists when I pull in those description files and matching them up. And it should be matching them by task name and task path, and for some reason they're showing up blank from one side. But it's a good example of what it would do. So it said, I found 3 orphan tasks, and so I will now disable those tasks, because if they're not in the repository, they shouldn't be running. And it keeps those task path areas matching up with whatever's in the repo. That's, again, that configuration as code framework, right? That mindset, I guess. Then it'll go through and it says, okay, I found 3 config files. I found one for my create tasks script, which is the script that's running right now. It already exists, so I'll edit that schedule task, and then it did so. And then it found a config file for the important production automations, and it already existed, so it updated it. Same thing with the psconfig as code framework. So now if I was to open up, come on, you can do it. If I was to open up Task Scheduler, you should see, hopefully, automation GitHub. Oh, perfect. Okay. So we have this GitHub core path within our scheduled tasks, and it's created a scheduled task to pull that important productions automations repo, and it's a little bit redundant. I get it. I'm trying to be a little bit redundant to make sure that we're pulling everybody along here, and sometimes staring at the code isn't as useful for making it click as seeing it out in the wild. So these are the tasks that are going to pull new code repositories to the server. PSC automation is where the create new scheduled task config file exists. But one thing I'm noticing that we're not seeing, this one's an old one. I think that one's disabled now. One thing that I'm not seeing though is it doesn't appear to be pulling in my really important automation file, the one that's going to get my Pokedex information. And so the reason for that is we've created a scheduled task that's going to pull these things, but it either hasn't run or something's going wrong and it's not working, which seems to probably be the case. And rather than troubleshoot that on live television for you, there's a number of things that can go into that. I didn't see anything in the output that we saw on our screen. If I go into logs, no, my log's not there. Am I looking in the wrong spot? Looking in the wrong spot. If I go to my logs folder, we'll check it out. We got our .log file. Sure, we'll open up in Visual Studio. Why not? Everyone should have Visual Studio Code on a production server, right? It said it successfully created everything, so it didn't have any problems creating the scheduled task. Everything was valid for actually creating it. Whatever it's running isn't happy with us, right? So we could probably just go in here and run a git pull important and see what fails. I can't find the file. Oh, because, okay, yeah, that makes sense. So, and I haven't set up my SSH for all of that. So yeah, again, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain, the unprepared man behind the curtain. But that's, like I said, something I was hoping that would come through today, is that sometimes the stuff's not perfect. But
no, but I think the
build it
value
anyways.
is also, to be clear, is that, you know, when, especially in these kind of demos and stuff, is that I think it's valuable to see the troubleshooting process, to see the errors, and that not that, you know, anybody's perfect, as you said originally, and that you're just trying to come up with a solution, is that this is totally accessible. These are challenges that you as a watcher and a consumer can consume, and that, you know, even somebody who's even come down to putting all this together, is that, hey, we can all come to this and then, you know, just learn from what others' examples have been. So that's kind of the value that, you know, we certainly want to offer, and know that it, you know, as one of the other attendees of our group and said, blood on the screen is not a problem. You know, oh my God, I've got you red. It's not a problem. Just, you know, deal with the problem as they come along. And sometimes you don't care that there's blood on the screen. So
absolutely, yeah. There's a fine line to walk between troubleshooting live and watching everybody see you crawl through it, and doing it in such a way that you know, does help, does show that, you know, it's not all perfect. Your goal isn't to be perfect and have perfect code. It's to know this stuff well enough that when things go wrong, you can start, okay, let me pick up this, let me look at a log file, let me find things. Because what comes from that, and I think it's a really good point to point out that these things are part of it. This is part of the process. What comes from that is you learn what you're going to need when you need to troubleshoot this in the future. So, you know, if I write a whole big long automation script and I do no logging at all, you know, down the line I'm going to be cursing past Lucas because, you know, he's done it again. He's put me in a spot that I've got to fix because of his mess. And so you start to learn, okay, what am I going to want to know later on in order to make these things right? But have a look around. I kind of get what's going on. I don't want to go through the process of fixing this right now. So I'm going to cheat. What I've done is I've just straight up cloned my important production automation. So we'll all pretend and golf clap at the fact that my scheduled task pulled that information down, and if it was working, it would have been awe-inspiring, and everyone would have gone home feeling better about themselves. But instead, we've just cloned it. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to run that script again, the create whatever. Actually, you know what? I don't. No, I will, because it's more visually. It'll put more on the screen. What I was going to say is this exists now as a scheduled task, and that scheduled task, which lives here, last ran 6:52, will run again at 6:32, and looks like I'm maybe having some trouble with that one too. But the idea is that this is going to continually run every 10 minutes or so. So it's always going to be recreating these scheduled tasks. So again, I was talking before, you change some code on the fly on the server because nobody's ever cowboyed into a server and changed production code. And then that gets overwritten again because the configuration as code framework is supposed to be saying this is the source of truth. You don't edit it here on the server. You change it there, you go through the approvals, you do the right thing. It's the same thing with the scheduled tasks. You can edit the scheduled tasks, but if it's continuously updating those based on what's in the repository, your changes aren't going to last. You have to do that from the code, which can sound onerous. That can sound like a barrier, but yes, that's kind of the point, is to save us from ourselves. Even today, I put in a pull request, which, I say that out loud. That's probably the third pull request I've ever done in my life, but it's something that's new to me, new to the team, and we're trying to do more of. So I put in a pull request rather than just pushing to main, which I confess that I usually do. And I was going over that with a teammate, and we were just kind of giddy about the whole pull request process because we've never done it before. But then we did realize that, I created a new function, and I'm using that new function in a new script that we're running, but I didn't build the module. So even though the function file was there, it never actually got published into the module, and the script itself is just importing the module. So if you don't update it, you're not going to get that new function. And I'd completely not done that. So not only did that pull request help because we learned something about pull requests, but we actually found a pretty major problem before we put it into production, right? So those are the things that you want to do. I'm going to run this script straight from the repository here rather than running the scheduled task, because I'm not even confident at this point that it's working. But what I'm hoping we'll see, let's see, it should have created a new one. Looks like it did. Important production automations created, and didn't yell at us. So I'm going to assume everything's going well with that. And so what we should see if we refresh this now is we've got, I think I put in an extra task config file when I was blazingly trying to get this done. But now we've got a scheduled task for this very important production automation, and it's going to run that that script found within that important production automations repository. And so ideally, I run this, and I refresh and cross my fingers, not running into issues again. I'm sure it's I'm willing to guess it's a credential issue maybe. But again, I could dive into the logs and have a look at that. But
Can you just, and I think you did a good job so far with this, but kind of talking and giving people other examples, and we don't have to go that deep into it, is at work and how you're doing this in production, or kind of use cases for using it. So in some fashion, the scaffolding of, hey, just pulling from the GitHub repo, and then it really doesn't matter what the scripts and the automation is doing, because that's what your, like, the automation is doing. Really, is that how you kind of like framed it? And so then you have this thing which was this scheduled tasks, which are just then pulling down tasks, but then what those tasks are doing comes like, you don't care at that point, right?
yeah, pretty much. It's like all good PowerShell projects, it started from, here's what we do. How can I use PowerShell to make that take less time? We didn't necessarily ask the question, is what we're doing right now the right way to do it? And so what we had was a Wild West server where way too many people still had admin access to it. Every automation that we'd ever created was hung off of this server, and you would RDP into it, open up task scheduler, make your scheduled task. You'd copy and paste your code to the server. Something doesn't work, so you're sitting there on the server editing code and editing the scheduled task until everything finally works, and you go, okay. You hit the X disconnect, and now your automation is out there in production. And this all started from there's got to be a better way to do this, not only for my own, because it started from how do I do these things better, and it very quickly morphed into how do we as an automation team do these things better. And so this is the automated version of all of that. It's doesn't really matter what the automation is doing. It's here's where the automation is. Make sure you're pulling down the latest version. And here's the automation file that you need to run. Make sure you're running that based on the schedule as described. And it, we're in production. We're doing things all across the board. We have a reporting server that basically we're taking information from disparate data sources and piecing it together and filling out a reporting SQL database with it. And we're using this whole concept for that. So we've got this, the idea is one script per table, so that, if we all win the lottery and don't show up at work tomorrow, people can open up that repository and see, okay, this table is this table is this, and kind of get an idea of where things are coming from, instead of being these nebulous tables that everyone uses and has vital information. Nobody knows when and where it gets that information. It's just always kind of been there. It's handed to us from the gods, and we use it in our Power BI reports. So yeah, it's some of the quirks of this today is the result of me trying to pick it up from something where it was tailor made for it and make it more open and get it running on a server, and maybe a little bit of procrastination getting the stuff ready in the first place. But that's exactly it. Is it doesn't really matter what the automation is doing. It's only concerned with where is it? Do I have the latest copy? And then creating a scheduled task to make that thing happen.
So Lucas, let me counter though. So prior to us kicking off this demo tonight, we were chatting in the pre-meeting talk with a bunch of people, and we were talking about Summit, and you had said it was great to go just to see examples of how other people are using things that I never thought of. So you showed a really good example here of like how you can use scheduled tasks and this framework and sort of automate the whole process. But if you can, and if you're willing to, if you could highlight some of the use cases that you guys use it for at work, it might help some people that are sitting here and saying, this is really cool, but I don't know what I would use it for. So like, what are some of the things that you guys have found that are automatable that you want to repeat, that you would use through a scheduled task that you're pushing to the servers? What kinds of
Sure.
things?
So I'll describe them. I don't think they would
that's
be
fine.
overly happy about me showing them, but I mentioned Graph API. Graph API is a big part of what I do, because a large part of what my team is responsible for is device management, endpoint management, and we've got something in the neighborhood of 80 to 90,000 Windows devices, across the globe. Actually, well, Windows and iOS, I suppose. And so a lot of the times, it comes down to filling a gap, either a reporting gap or a tool set gap. One example is Intune will provide you with a report for Windows 11 upgrade readiness. And it will show you, here's a list of your devices. And it'll give you a count for each one of, how many potential risks there are for your Windows 11 upgrade. It'll also give you a list of those risks. So this Bluetooth driver has trouble on Windows 11, or this application will get uninstalled and then reinstalled after upgrade and could cause problems, whatever the risk may be. It gives you a list of the risks and how many computers have that risk. You can click each of the risks and it'll give you a list of those devices. But nowhere can I just get a list of things that'll say device A has risk 1, device A also has risk 2, device B has risk 1, and just get a full list of them. All I could do was go risk by risk and scroll through the list of devices. So one of the automations that we put together was, again, very Band-Aid, very hacky, but at the end of the day, it had enough error handling that it stayed running, and we knew when it didn't, and it was mostly stable. And it would use Graph API to one by one get the list of risks and get the list of devices per risk, and then take that all together and combine it and put it into a table. And then we use that downstream for Power BI dashboards and things of that nature. So that was an instance where I couldn't get the reports that we needed, but I could access one by one the data that I needed. So I put that into a script and had it sit there and try not to get too throttled my Graph API and wait. It'd be a good citizen and wait however many seconds it needed to for the retry. So that was one. Another one was we had a business need for adding people, users, to a group, and then those users would get the Windows Hello for Business pilot that we were running. But to apply the Windows Hello for Business configuration, it needed to be applied to a device, not to a user. But we didn't want to keep adding devices for each user that needs a new device added or whatever. So we would take that user group that was managed, and they would add the accounts to it, and we would go one by one through those people and pull all of their devices, and then add or remove or edit as necessary a second group that is just filled with device objects. That way, if your user is in the group, then all of your device objects are going to get that Windows Hello for Business configuration. So filling gaps, creating tools that don't exist now that we need. There was no option for, hey, let's make a group and then just apply it to the devices of all these people rather than the user. Don't fact check me on that. Maybe we just didn't know what we were doing. But yeah, we were able to, like I was saying before, create an entire reporting database using the same structure, where we have a separate repository for that project, for the reporting database project. And within that repository is one script per table for all these disparate data sources that we're pulling from. And the same automation framework handles that too. It clones that repository, and it will create a scheduled task for each one of those table scripts, and then it'll run it on a daily basis to make sure that that SQL table is continuously updated with all that information. So again, kind of to, I think it was Phil talking before, but kind of Phil's point, it doesn't matter what the automation is, although your point is, sometimes it helps to hear these things. The framework itself just takes care of getting it there and making sure it runs. Everybody's had a need for these things. Everybody has maybe even had scheduled tasks on their own system running to clean that up or do that thing. This provides you a clean way to do your development locally, but still have those changes show up on the server, and to make sure that there's less and less benefit for people to actually log onto that server to do work. Ideally, you never have to. Ideally, you just upload your code to the GitHub, and that changes what's on the server, and that's all. In practice, nothing is perfect. I still have to go on there to update credentials, and I was blown away by some of the presentations at Summit that talked about managed identities. So that's another rabbit hole I'll go down with this framework soon enough. But really, what I wanted to show today was I started with a question of how can I do this better as a person, as a team member, and how can we do it better as a team? How can we apply that to our process so that our process is better? And once you start doing that, yeah, I could have done this with Jenkins. I could have done this with Ansible or any of the many configuration as code, infrastructure as code tool sets that are out there. But the value of what we learned from implementing this is huge. And this is custom made. We had a very simple setup. We're just using scheduled tasks. All we need is just a way that I don't need to click, 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 click to do that. This provides that. So sometimes, even though the mature tool set is out there, you can build something that solves your problem instead of the tool set that is built to solve many problems, right? So yeah, that's there was one last little piece of this puzzle that I didn't go through a lot, but I just want to show it here. I created a function called new PSC environment variables because one of the ways that I'm handling some of the information and some of the configuration, I should say, is through environment variables. So everybody knows the path environment variable, where when you type in a command, it will search your current directory, and then it'll go through all the directories listed in your path to find out to find a command that matches that, or an exe that matches that, or whatever. You can create your own, and they're very easily accessible from PowerShell. So I created a script, and it will or I created a function, and it'll ask you, hey, what do you want this to be? What do you want that to be? And you give it the parameters, and then it goes out there and it creates those environment variables for you. Those are very easily accessible. First by typing $env : and then if you just do control space, you can see a whole list of them that are available. A lot of these are just automatic that are built in. But if I do PSC control space, will let me do that? Yeah, so here's specifically for this framework, the environment variables that I'm using. So my PSC default account is the name of the local user account that these scheduled tasks are running as. The default owner is that GitHub account. At work, it's only ever one GitHub organization that we're getting it from. We all make our own repositories, but we give the ownership of that repository to the overall GitHub organization. So no need to keep typing it in every time. I have an environment variable so that my plaster scripts, when they're creating those configuration files, they can just pull the value from that environment file or environment variable. So anyways, I got a bunch on here. Like here's my log output path. This is where I want my logs to go, things like that. So I created a function that would just allow me to set those on a given server, because at the end of the day, this wasn't built for me to take a server bare bones from scratch, hit a couple of buttons, and have it deploy everything. It's not going to have the credentials because I can't. Well, there's lots of ways to do it, but at the time I wasn't there yet in my journey. So maybe that's the roadmap for down the road. But really, what I want to leave you with, and by leave you with, I mean I'll finally stop talking, and if there are questions, I'll start talking again. But what I really wanted to leave you with was this idea of like, guess what? No one really knows what they're doing. Okay, maybe that's not entirely true, but we all have questions. We all have things we don't know. And that's not based on being smart or dumb. It's about what have you experienced so far in your journey? And when did you start that journey? My journey started 8 years ago. This is the culmination of 8 years of learning and reading and watching videos and taking 6 months off from any PowerShell and then getting back into it and relearning stuff that I've been learning for the last year. So wherever it is that you are on that journey, don't shy away from some of these fun opportunities to solve problems just because something else out there also does that, or because you don't think that you're in a place where you're a tool maker, you're the person who is like building these things. These are all learning opportunities, and they start small. Solve one little problem, and you'll use that to solve another, and use that to solve another. And then before you know it, you've got your own crappy little configuration as code tool set that someone will ask you to speak at a user group about.
Cool. Well, I certainly thank you for, sharing your insights with us. And I think, you've given a bunch of people in chat, they've been chatting along definitely, and we've been watching that really, really a lot tonight. And, some of the insights you have, just like laying the foundation and the examples of what's truly possible. And as you kind of heard before, Mike's got some ideas and like, oh, I could use that here. And that is really what the magic is for that. And I say magic because, you can make anything out of it. It is whatever your imagination can make of it. And so I'm really happy, and thanks for sharing with us. And certainly everybody who out there, if you'd like to, join the Research Roundtable PowerShell group and come out and join us, certainly come out and join us. But if you'd like to present as well, Mike and I are here to encourage that and also to support you in any way we can. Got any other final words, Mike?
No, I was just going to say, nice job of showing some different ways to get around things that people probably struggle with, and show some essentially like an alternative way to use some tools that, I mean, literally I never thought of using the PSD files for those kinds of things. So really interesting idea. I know we saw some of this at Summit, and that's how but when I saw that idea, I was like, I would have never have thought to ever use that. And so that's really, I think, the biggest bonus is to get exposed to ideas that you've never seen or considered, and maybe open up the possibilities for more things to try. So great job with that. Before we wrap, Mark has a question.
Yeah, I've actually got two questions. One, Lucas, you talked in the introduction to your presentation. I thank you again for your presentation, about generating the script. It was one of your goals or criteria, and then making sure that it runs correctly. And I was wondering if you were doing, generating some tests or that would challenge the code or validate the code under different in different inputs and different environments. The idempotent phrase term to me says if you invoke a function with the same input, you're going to get the same output.
Yeah.
So that was the first one, and the second one was, were you at all inspired by, you mentioned Ansible, the other configuration tools or desired state configuration? Did you take inspiration from other tools?
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of testing, my answer would be, are we still recording? Yeah. Of course, I build tests for everything that I do. No, I am still very much in that space that a lot of us find ourselves of, knowing the importance of tests and still kind of like chugging along with writing good tests. I will say that we had an issue the other day where I mentioned we are using the secrets management module, and with that we have the secret store module as the vault that we're using. And when you set that all up, you register a vault. You install both modules, and then you say register vault with secret store. And then one day nothing was working. None of the scheduled tasks were running. And when I started investigating it, our vault just wasn't registered anymore. And so I kind of took some backups of some stuff that was around. And then I just, okay, register vault again, I guess, enter. And then everything worked again. Now there's a pester test that runs that will specifically look for, is the vault registered, and does it contain this credential, this credential, this credential? Which, if you were company A and company B and you're both using this framework, that test would only be half useful, because company A and company B are going to have entirely different credential sets that they're going to want to use. But you're absolutely right in the sense that there's a lot of opportunity for making sure that if you're going to have something that's going to pull down a bunch of code and make sure that it's on the system and run it, that all the little pieces that lead up to being able to do that, like, I don't know, are the scripts going to work properly because you've properly set up your SSH access to GitHub before your presentation so that everything is able to clone itself. Huge opportunities for bolstering the system a little bit more. I have not leveraged enough of them, mainly due to the fact that I think that that first part of configuration as code that I won't try to pronounce was the lesser important part at the time of creating the tool set, because we were custom making it for our current setup. And instead of thinking, okay, let's make an overall framework that works for us as well as maybe some others. Definitely drew a lot of inspiration from, you name it, Ansible, DSC. These are all areas that, here's something I think that we as PowerShell users, PowerShell developers, tool makers, sometimes struggle with, especially early in the journey, is we're just scripters, right? Why would I use GitHub? It's just scripts. It's not, I'm not a programmer. I don't need full source control. But you get to a point in your journey where you realize, no, absolutely. It's too far away. You need to use Git. And the angry duck says use Git.
I think just use the community itself and just know that you don't need to solve all problems, and you can go from there, right? And to your other point of, hey, with testing is minimum viable product. You can be your own MVP. Get yourself to MVP, right? And you can be an MVP and to go from there point. So, and the community is at large. You're not the only one solving this problem. And so, engage with the community, both from consumer and then also share the lessons you have. And that's really what you've done tonight, Lewis. And I think you've done a great job, and I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah.
Yeah. Any other final words, Mike? Good?
No. Lucas looks like he had a final thought that he was about to say.
You know what? I've always got just one more final thought. So if you don't cut me off,
you're up, man. You're up. I'll give you what you want, and you can take us home.
All right. Gilbert had a question in the chat, and he asked about, have you handled layered configs? Most configuration management tools have the idea of being able to target changes to specific hosts / set of hosts. So I'll answer this question with my closest experience to that, because I've got one server and this was built for that server. And so I'm just now starting that journey of taking that aside and putting together something that could be used for multiple use cases. But I tend to make a lot of use of environment variables. Mostly when I'm doing development versus production stuff, I've got SQL Express running on my local dev box, and I will often put things into the configuration that says, if there's an environment variable of environment equals prod or something like that, then here's the configuration to use. Otherwise, use this. And so it's the difference between, you're running a function that sends data to a SQL database, unless it sees that specific environment variable that only exists on that server, it's going to use localhost, it's going to use your server, it's going to do these things in a non-destructive, non-production way. And I feel like that could be probably branched out to say, here's a number of configs based on name of the computer, or some environment variable that describes the type of work that it's doing, and it could either pull down or not pull down repos based on that, or run functions a different way, paths a different way, that kind of thing. Don't know if that's exactly what you're getting at with layered configs, but that would be my closest experience with it.
All right. Did Phil drop? Oh, there he is.
Sorry, I'm still here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
I was trying to
listen.
give Lucas his floor.
So we got to see a bunch of different ways to solve some challenges tonight. Some interesting sort of like what's the word I'm looking for? Not so obvious solutions to everyday problems, which was kind of unique. And so I think that's really the beauty of this. We talked earlier about like Band-Aids, but that's not really the right word to say this. This is really like finding the tools that you use to make your own suite of tools based on what's available. And this ad hoc experience of putting tools together to make your own custom tool set is really the mantra here, right? You can take a bunch of disparate tools that don't necessarily fit together and make them fit together to solve some unique challenges that you're trying to deal with at work. And that's really, I think, the takeaway from tonight. And so I think, Lucas, you did a really awesome job with that. Thanks for the time tonight. I guess we should wrap it up and remind everybody, if you're watching this at home, hopefully you've seen our YouTube channel. We have over 150 videos. You can come out and check us out. But more importantly, come and join us in person. Find us at rtpsug.com or on Meetup. Search for RTPSUG, and you'll find out the information about the next meeting. And so thanks, everybody, for joining us tonight. We hope you had a great time. We'll see you next time.